Good Monday evening, everybody, and welcome back to another video. As you see, I'm back from a very well-needed week vacation from Tennessee, and I did enjoy my time. I did quite a lot of stuff. Like I went to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and just throughout Tennessee. Yeah. But that's not what I'm here to talk about in this video. Tonight, I'm going to finally give you the 13 movies I watched in May. Now, as a disclaimer, this video was supposed to be filmed after my top 10 war movies. That was supposed to come out on Memorial Day, but I just didn't have time to film it, so I'm going to try and get that video out to you guys by July 4th. I still want to do that video because there are quite a few good war movies I want to talk about. But it's been a week and I'm back in full swing. So let's go ahead and get this video started with the first movie I watched was Guardians of the Galaxy. So of course you'll see the whole trilogy in this video. So I just did a rewatch of the first two, gearing up for Volume 3. So in this movie, this was released in 2014, way back in Phase 2, and it stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and Vin Diesel as the titular Guardians of the Galaxy. So this is their origin story on how they met, and their first villain is Ronan the Accuser, which is kind of like a lackey for Thanos. This is considered to be one of the best MCU movies. It's pretty high up on a lot of people's lists. It's clearly in my top 10. I really enjoy this movie. Every time I watch it, I just have a blast with it. And not to mention, the soundtracks to all three of these are perfect. But this one, as it now stands, is my second favorite. Squirrel. You'll see which one definitely is a little bit better. But I did post a Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy thoughts video at the beginning of last month, so you'll get my full thoughts on that. But that was the first movie I watched in May. Moving on to, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And a lot of people have this very low on their MCU list. It's kind of in the middle for me. But in my opinion, Ego might be a better villain than Ronan the Accuser. He's just more interesting because Ego is Peter's father, which is a celestial, and he's basically a living planet. So he needs to find Peter to gain more power for him to absorb the universe. So there's a lot more comedy in here, a lot more action, and it's got a very centric 70s disco soundtrack to it. And I really, really do enjoy this one. but some of the humor just doesn't land as much as you would think it would. But it is still a very enjoyable movie. That was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And then the next movie I watched was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And this right now is easily in my top 5 favorite MCU movies. And it's easily the best out of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, because this movie explores Rocket's background, and it is tragic because he's captured by the High Evolutionary, which is kind of like this sentient being that just like takes care of most of the universe, basically. And Rocket is forced into like brutal slavery. I mean, he's being tested on, and he meets Lila, Floor, and Teeths. And I'm already like starting to like hold it back now. I saw this movie twice, and it is probably one of the best superhero movies this year by far. And there are still quite a few movies coming out. The Flash is coming out Friday, but I think this one is probably going to be the best superhero movie of the year. It's just a fantastic movie. I have nothing at all bad to say about it, except for it's more of like a mixed element. It's not necessarily a negative element. Peter and Gamora are pretty much like still coming to terms with remembering each other. Well, it's more of Gamora because he's now with past Gamora, and she's been more with Thanos. But that's literally the only kind of negative thing I have to say about this movie. The soundtrack's really incredible. Got a lot of 90s and 2000s songs on there, so it's definitely my era. And I just cannot wait to rewatch this one like a lot more times. It is highly rewatchable. So that was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The next movie is a rewatch of A Man Called Otto. So I rewatched this with my mom and sister. I already did see it in January, so I already talked about it. I read the book, A Man Called Uwe, and the story focuses on this depressed older man who recently lost his wife, and he has nothing to do with like making new friends, and he's very suicidal. But a new family like moves across the street from him, and they befriend him, and he becomes to terms with being their friend as well. It's a very touching story. It's very sad and very hilarious at times, but it is not an easy movie to watch if you deal with like mental issues. It's kind of graphic in the way he goes to do like these suicidal ideas. I mean, there's like one part where he just like lets the exhaust from his car just let him go, but he gets saved after all these suicide attempts, but he dies of an enlarged heart. So it's a really, really good movie and a really, really fantastic book. It was one of the first books I read this year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I can definitely see myself rewatching this quite a few times as well. I just don't have the Blu-ray yet. I actually watched it on Netflix this time around. But moving on to a much different movie, and I just threw this on like early in May, like on a night where I was bored. The next movie I want to talk about is Shark Night 3D. And this is about a group of friends who go to like Louisiana, and they're like stalked by like these hillbilly people, I guess, and they just like have like sharks with them, and yeah, they just fight to survive. It's kind of a silly movie and very forgettable. I honestly forgot that I almost even watched this last month, but I just threw it on for fun. That was Shark Night 3D. Moving on. A rewatch of Thor Love and Thunder. Yeah. This time around, it was pretty tiring, if you want to say that. But I had a lot of fun with Guardians of the Galaxy last month, so I just threw this on because I remember that the Guardians of the Galaxy were in this movie, but it is very, very brief. So this movie follows Thor reuniting with Jane Foster, and Jane Foster is now diagnosed with some kind of cancer, and she wields the power of Mjolnir, making her Almighty Thor. So, at first, I really did enjoy this movie, but it is just goofy. And not to mention, they waste Gore the God Butcher. So, it's a very goofy, but very frustrating movie as well. But it does have that anticipation for another Thor movie, teasing Hercules. So, if that ever comes into fruition, they have to tone it down a bit, because this is like heavy metal on acid and screaming goats. But all jokes aside, this is still a very enjoyable movie for what it was, but it is near the bottom of my MCU ranking. But that was Thor Love and Thunder. Next up are two movies that I grew up watching a gazillion times as a kid. That first movie is Beethoven. Don't make fun of me. I love dogs. But this movie was released in 1992, I want to say. And it stars Charles Grodin, R.I.P. and Bonnie Hunt, and they're just like this. They have 3 kids. They live in the suburbs, and a stray Saint Bernard puppy escapes from like pet wranglers one night, and they adopt him and they treat him as their own. But then you have like an evil vet who wants to euthanize dogs and destroy them. So it's actually a really, really dark movie if you look at it disguised as a family movie. But of course, this is like geared towards kids and families. I still enjoy it after all these years. Which leads me into Beethoven's Second. In my opinion, the sequel might be a little bit better than the original. It's a lot more memorable, and it is the perfect movie to watch during this time of the year. Because it technically is a summer movie. And the Newtons are now planning their 4th of July week mountains. They have a cabin in the mountains. But Beethoven like finds this girl dog, and he gets her pregnant, and the owners of the girl dog's name is Missy, by the way, they don't like that so much, so they want to destroy the puppies and kill Missy. But of course, the Newtons step in and save the day. I really do enjoy this movie, but it's got some very uncomfortable thematic elements. Especially with the older daughter getting with this guy at a party. It's almost kind of like gonna turn into like a rape scene. But of course, Beethoven just like pulls the house towards the lake and stuff. But these 2 movies are very, very enjoyable. They are officially like 30 years old, believe it or not. But that was Beethoven and Beethoven's Second. Next up is another movie that I grew up with, gearing towards another movie that I'm going to talk about. I rewatched The Little Mermaid, 1989, and this was a Disney staple, and it adapted the Disney Renaissance. So this is based off of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. And it's about like this egotistical mermaid named Ariel who doesn't want anything to do with like the ocean world anymore. She's kind of like rebellious towards her father, and she goes up to the surface world and she sees this prince named Eric, and she starts to fall in love with him. So the only way to actually fall in love with him is asking for help from Ursula the Sea Witch. Which definitely wasn't a good idea, because at first, granting Ariel sea legs was a good idea for her, but in exchange for that, Ursula wants her voice. So, Ursula gives her the opportunity to fall in love with Eric in the course of 3 days. And the way to become human permanently is to kiss before sundown after the third day. They come very close, but Ursula ruins it, and Ariel becomes a mermaid, and then, of course, the final battle against Ursula, which is definitely one of the darkest Disney deaths in movie history, in my opinion, because she gets harpooned by a ship, and then Triton comes back. He gets destroyed by Ursula, by the way, and Triton gives her sea legs, and she falls in love with Eric for eternity. That was a lot to say. So, I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit, and I'll have my full thoughts on The Little Mermaid on my channel, so check that out. But moving on to Fast X, and at the time, this was only my second new release in May that I saw. May was a very, very slow month, so I was very much looking forward to this one. And I have to say, it was probably one of the better entries, but the cliffhanger was so frustrating. It just cuts to black. And I'm like thinking, oh God, we're going to have to wait another couple years for this. But this, of course, like reunites pretty much everybody from like the Fast and the Furious universe. And Jason Momoa is, of course, the standout as the villain in this movie. He is literally the best part of this movie. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It's extremely dumb, but very fun at the same time. So I did post a review on this movie. If you want my full thoughts, check that out. But moving on, I watched the live action remake of The Little Mermaid. And pretty much the same premise as the original, but the romance was more fleshed out. And this movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes. To me, it's a little long for a Disney movie, but they had to do that to add more stuff in there, because that is Disney live action remakes' reputation. They just add and add and add. Why? So, Halle Bailey is extremely awesome in this movie as Ariel, of course. And, yeah. Melissa McCarthy is decent as Ursula, but Halle Bailey is definitely the standout in this movie. I had a lot of fun with this, to be honest, but I'll probably not watch it as often as I would any other Disney live action remake. And I haven't seen them all, and I've only seen not even 10 of them. But this is one of the better ones. So like I said, I did make a Little Mermaid video. Come at me. So yeah, just check out my full thoughts on both of these movies in that video. That's pretty much a 20-minute video as well, so I definitely talked about both of these versions quite a bit. And moving on, I caught The Machine, And this is like an action comedy starring Bert Kreischer. And this is all about like a very famous bit that he talks about in his stand-up. I'm not really a big fan of Bert Kreischer. In fact, the only thing that I knew him from was Bert the Conqueror, which is kind of like a show on Travel Channel where he like rides all these roller coasters. That's how I first heard of him. But he is basically an American that gets mixed up with like the Russian mafia, and this whole movie talks about that whole experience. So, I'm trying to remember. He teams up with his dad, which is played by Mark Hamill, which was definitely a really cool selling point for this movie. And they both go to Russia, and they befriend this woman, and they're just trying to survive from the crime bosses. I had a lot of fun with this movie, but I just don't know enough about Bert Kreischer. But I really did follow the story very well. I might need a rewatch of it. But that was The Machine. And finally, the final movie I watched in May, gearing up towards the next video I want to film, was a rewatch of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, this is the first ever Spider-Man animated movie. And when I first saw it, it blew me away on its visuals and just dazzling animation style. This is a comic book come to life. I know that sounds corny, but it truly is. And this introduces pretty much the multiverse, but with different Spider-Men and women and pigs and robots and lots of other stuff. But this introduces Miles Morales, which is another variant of Spider-Man, and he's kind of like a Latino Spider-Man, if you will. And he just gets mixed up with Peter B. Parker, Spider-Gwen, or Gwen Stacy, Spider-Ham, Spider-Noir, and I forgot what the anime Spider-Girl thing was, but yeah. This whole movie is awesome. It's got some jaw-dropping visual effects. And Kingpin is a really, really good villain for this movie, because he's very sympathetic. And this movie is pretty simple to the point where any casual Spider-Man fan would enjoy it. I really do enjoy this movie, and I'm glad that Across the Spider-Verse came out. So I'm going to talk about that one in probably my next video. But this was a very, very good animated movie that just has everything that Spider-Man fans would want. So, those are the 13 movies I watched in May. And as you saw, it was a very heavy Marvel month, which was very surprising. But I also did finish WandaVision, and I did start Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well in May. So I was pretty much on a Marvel high in May, thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But that's all I got for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's good to be back. And my next video is going to be my Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse movie review. And then yesterday, I finally saw Transformers Rise of the Beasts and The Boogeyman. So I'll have reviews up for those possibly in the next couple days. And then, if time serves me well, I'm going to start my Indiana Jones run through. And then I'll have my review of The Flash by the weekend. So it's a very, very tiring week. But I do enjoy doing this. It's kind of like a little hobby of mine. And I really do enjoy everybody watching. So that's pretty much what I got for this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios. Peace.